And welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast podcast. I've lost track of whether we've wished our lovely listeners, yes, all of you, a very happy new year. I can't remember because every show has just blended into one, and we only did one show over the Christmas period, so I have no excuse. So my humble apologies, but I am your host, Kris, as usual, and I'm joined by two of my regular panelists for tonight's show, where we're just going to have a little attempt at going back through a couple of fixtures from the Premier League all the way down to League Two over the past 10 days or so. So I shall introduce my panelists. I've got Ross and Josh back with me. Good evening to you both.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's been busy, hasn't it, chaps? We've we promised two shows over the festive period, so we're classing the 5th of January as the festive period. So if anyone asks, just plead ignorance. It will all be fine. We're going to start with the Premier League then, and rather than going all the way back to the games in the couple of days after Boxing Day and New Year, we're going to kind of look at the fixtures from this past week that have gone by. We might just hark back to the fixtures previous briefly as we go. Shall we start at the top or the bottom? Let's start at the bottom, shall we? Because let's change it around a bit. So when we last recorded a podcast, I'm not sure if Bob Bradley had been relieved of his duties or not. He had. Okay. And of course, we knew that Mr. Pardew had left Crystal Palace. So let's look at those two teams first of all, because they played each other in midweek, just on Tuesday night, in fact. And Swansea took the points from Selhurst Park against Crystal Palace. Now, Palace, of course, coming off the back of a 2-0 defeat away at Arsenal and that goal. And Swansea off the back of a hammering under caretaker coach, what's the fella's name? Alan Curtis. So these two met. Let's start with Ross. What do you sort of make of this result? Because it was a very late winner from, of all people, Angel Rangel, to give it proper pronunciation. Anyone that called that in their betting slip, well done to you. And a goal from Alfie Mawson. So two sort of set-piece goals, sandwiching a Will Zaha goal. He's of course, going to be... I think, is he going to be away? Is he going to be away?
He's gone already. He has joined up with the Ivory Coast.
Of course it is, yes. So he's away. So let's get some thoughts from you both. And Ross, let's start with you. Swansea, is this the perfect start for their new boss, Paul Clement, who of course has come across from Bayern Munich? You'll know him a little bit from his days at Derby. He's into the hot seat. He kind of half managed this game, half didn't. So how much can we read into this result from a Swansea perspective?
I think if you're looking at it as an examination of how well Paul Clement is going to do, I think this is not the game to be analysing him on, but it's a very good start. I think it says more about the issues they had under Bob Bradley, because I wouldn't have had faith in them going away to Palace and getting 3 points under Bob Bradley, because they just didn't look anywhere near good enough to even get a point, let alone 3. Under Alan Curtis, they seem to have loosened things up a bit. They've seemed to have put a bit more confidence in them. Just from following Lille in Ligue 1 this year, reminds me a lot of them. Under Antonetti, they weren't the best side, and then suddenly the change came in. They brought up one of their former players and someone that's been a huge part of the club for so long, gets back in the hot seat and just kind of G's them back up again, reminds them that the Swansea badge is a big badge to the fans, and it just seems to have energised them just a little bit. And that the Palace result did surprise me. I would have expected Palace to have gone on to have at least drawn that. To have lost it, I think, is great testament to Alan Curtis and the work that he does. Almost a surprise he hasn't got it on a full-time basis, but I suppose he's not the attractive name that Swansea are looking for. But it's a great platform for Paul Clement to build on. I did mix him up with Vassell at Derby, which was a massive misstep on my part, but when I remembered who he actually was, Paul Clement did a very good job at Derby County, and a lot of people said, and I agreed with it at the time, he was quite harshly done by when he got the sack. So I am looking forward to seeing how well he does. He's got a great reputation in the game, but the issue I have with coaches that make the step up is there's a lot of coaches that have made the step up to management and just haven't cut it. And I hope it's not going to be the same for Paul Clement, because like I say, he did do very well at Derby and he has got such a good pedigree. It's an exciting appointment, but it would be, well, I think it will be a more exciting appointment next season when they're in the Championship and it's his side and it's his Swansea team that are out. At the moment, I just kind of feel sorry for him because it's going to be a hard couple of months with Swansea, I think.
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I wonder how much. I think what will really tell us where Swansea are in this January window in particular is how much they spend or how little they spend. I think if you see a lot of players coming in January, I think they might think we've got a genuine chance. And you look at the table. I mean, we can cover this maybe a bit later when we do the table, but they aren't doomed. You know, people have been talking like they've been gone for weeks, and they really aren't. I mean, 2 or 3 wins and they're mid-table. So it'd be very interesting to see if they do put their eggs into the basket in January and say, right, let's back this manager and let's get some. Get some players in and really fight for this Champions Premier League survival, and avoid the Championship.
I think the thing about them was that Premier League fans have this kind of theory that you only change your manager once in a season, if you're going to at all. Whereas if you go further down the leagues and other nations as well, sometimes there's 2 or 3 changes. I don't think many people genuinely saw Bob Bradley coming in and then getting sacked as quickly as he did. So I think people have been condemning them for the past few weeks because they thought they'd made their one and only managerial change and they were going to stick with Bob Bradley. Now they've changed again. It's up in the air. I still don't see enough about this Swansea side to believe they'll stay up. But Paul Clement did have Derby playing some very nice free-flowing football. So there's every possibility that they can at least drag themselves out and drag someone in. Like I keep saying every week, you've only got to be better than 3 teams, And I think Swansea, if they can start playing proper football again, could very well drag someone down into the battle.
Yeah, their squad is better than at least 5 teams I'm looking at in front of me now. But we'll cover those. What about from a Palace perspective, Josh? I mean, obviously they've got Sam Allardyce in. There is this sort of myth that he's never been relegated, because I'm pretty sure he was relegated with Notts County, but he hasn't been relegated at the Premier League level at least. So has he maybe taken on a bit more than he expected in Palace? Because they look aside to me, and I think even the fans were turning a bit the other night from what I got wind of from reports that some of the fans were a little bit disgruntled. Has he maybe bitten off a little bit more than he can chew? Has he maybe sort of let his ego get the better of him, thinking he can just rock up and Tony Pulis Palace? Because it doesn't look like he's got them really changed at all in 3 games, not from what I've seen anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that the Big Sam needs to look at in that Crystal Palace squad. It's not a particularly good one defensively, so I don't think they've been able to defend set pieces for at least a calendar year under Pardew, and that's basically what Sam's made for, is set piece offensive and set piece defensive work. That's going to take a while to drill into a team that hasn't really done that particularly well across a whole year under Alan Pardew. I think the next couple of fixtures, it might give him a chance. I don't think against Arsenal he was really going to get anything out of the game. It's an upset here against Swansea, but he's got West Ham at the Olympic Stadium next week. And with West Ham's home form being absolutely dreadful, there's potential there to upset a former club.
That will be an interesting game. There's quite a lot of really big fixtures coming up at the bottom, and staying down at the bottom, we have to look at the other 2 teams that are heavily involved. I'm going to give you one each. Ross, I'm going to start with you. You got the short straw. Hull City. Bit to talk about though here. Mike Phelan. I keep wanting to say Terry Phelan. Mike Phelan has obviously lost his job. Before we just look at Hull as a whole, try saying that when you've had a few jars. Do you feel a bit sorry for Mike Phelan? I mean, he did a brilliant job as caretaker. He took the job under quite a lot of promises. Or do you look at it and think he was very naive, seeing as that Steve Bruce basically walked out of the job for very similar reasons as to why Mike Phelan has now been sacked from it?
There is a certain level of naivety about it, but at the same time, I think he's been sold down the river, because this whole side was in the Championship. I said at the time it was the most Premier League ready squad, but it still needed improvement, and it got none whatsoever when they came up, because Sam Alam is clearly trying to move the club on, doesn't want to invest any more money in it. So he has been sold down the river a little bit, because there's nothing else you can do with this squad other than try and keep the goals out, which they just can't do, because they've either got no one available or they're just not good enough quality. At the same time, I think Mike Phelan knew exactly what he was doing when he took this job, he wants to be a Premier League manager, from what I understand of him and his press conferences before he took it. And I think he just kind of thought, you know what, this is a dead-end job, and it's going to be hell. But if I can be here, and I can put on some good performances, and I can kind of just roll with it for a few months, and show people what I can do, then it's better than having nothing on my CV. So I think he's probably got what he needs out of it. If he'd stayed the whole season, CV probably would have been a bit stronger in terms of results. I don't think anyone will look at Mike Phelan's CV and see relegated with Hull City and think, nah, he's not for me. I think they'll look at some of the performances and they'll say, you know what, he did really well under tough circumstances. So as upset as I think he'll be that he's lost the job, I think there'll be a part of him that says, you know what, I've done pretty well, I've got what I need out of it. And now they've obviously brought in, is his name Marco Silva, I think is his name now.
Is that official? Is it? I don't
yeah,
know
it's been officialed. He was linked with Nottingham Forest back in the summer before they went for Philip Montagnier. So I did do a little bit of research on him at the time, and when Kenny Jackett left Wolves, he was also touted for that one. He is thought very highly of. I know Southampton have him in their black box scouting system as well. Did very well with Sporting, did very well with Olympiacos. Both of those clubs he's won titles with and got sacked on very dubious grounds, or left on very dubious grounds. So he is a very exciting manager. I would be more excited for them if it was the summer and I knew he was coming in for a new championship season. So it's going to be, again, tough for him. But he is a very exciting appointment. I can't wait to see how he does. But I do think he's stepping into a job that, as of right now, is not suited to his talents.
He's a very, very good coach. I can tell you that from my geeking of European football and whatnot. At Olympiacos, he was thought of very highly, and I'm pretty sure, I'd have to check this, but I'm 99% sure he was in charge when Arsenal went out there last, and he did a very, very good tactical sort of set of performances against us home and away. And yeah, he's very highly thought of. But like you, I wonder if his style, because he likes to play a more open, expansive style of football if he can, and he likes flair players. I'm not sure he's going to find many of them at Hull, if I'm honest.
Who's the most flair player at Hull City? Snodgrass?
Robert Snodgrass, who's going to be sold, yes. So, I can't see Diambersi Yambakani sort of doing 8 step overs and racing the length of the pitch to score. But and of course, as Josh puts in our chat, Hull have got an EFL Cup semi-final coming up against Manchester United, I think I'm right in saying, next week. So, yeah, it's tough to see where next for Hull, but Josh, you get the other end of the stick, which is Sunderland. David Moyes, I don't know. Something still doesn't feel right for Sunderland. A lot of players that, without Defoe, I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine where they'd be, bottom. But, they are scoring goals. They were absolutely appalling when they played, I believe it was Burnley, wasn't it, on the Boxing Day fixtures. And they were absolutely abysmal, and they got turned over comfortably 4-1, I think it was, on the day, as a hat-trick from Andre Gray there, who backs himself up by saying he'd score goals at this level. But then they came back and put in a creditable performance against Liverpool, albeit 2 Defoe penalties. But they looked better in spells of that game. What do you make of them? Do you, is there enough there to keep them up, or do you think Moyes is a bit of a dead man walking with that squad?
I think it depends what he's going to do in this transfer window, or what the club are going to do in this transfer window, seeing as they're trying to hastily bat off bids from West Ham for Jermaine Defoe. The guy is worth easily £40 million to Sunderland if he keeps them up, if he keeps up his goal-scoring record for them as well. I think the next nearest scorer to them is Van Arnholt, and he's their left-back. But the biggest problem I can see with Sunderland is they're getting wins, and their goal difference is absolutely awful. But you're looking at the teams that they're getting battered by, and Burnley and Swansea are in that list, putting 3 and 4 past them. That's not the kind of record you want when you're trying to battle relegation. You've got to be beating those teams that are around you. Saying that, they could try and get out. They've only 1 point behind Crystal Palace and 4 behind Middlesbrough. But whether or not they've got the quality around the whole park, I'm not so sure, especially with Pickford out now as well.
Yeah, he's a big loss, isn't he? There's a lot of talk that Man City and Arsenal are both potentially looking to sign him in this January window and loading him back, but that all seems to have gone quiet since his injury. So that sort of touches on the teams that are actually in and around it. But there's one team that well, there's probably another two teams actually we should give a little bit of time to at this stage. One is Leicester. I'll stick with you, Josh, on Leicester because I know I've asked Ross about them quite a lot. Leicester are currently sitting 15th. Now they had a sort of a mixed festive period. They got the 1-0 victory over West Ham a couple of games previously, and then they had a 0-0 with Middlesbrough, which was, if anyone sat through that, I mean, you have my sympathies. I sat through it, and it was, well, it was not very good. That's the nicest way I can put that without being very rude to Middlesbrough and Leicester fans, but it was a terrible game of football. Leicester strike me as a club that are really not sure where they're heading. Players out of form, players not performing at any level, even when they get given chances. The focus is clearly the Champions League. Ranieri is starting to come under a little bit of fire is the wrong word, but pressure, better word. But what do you make of them? And do you, in your opinion, think they are in a relegation fight at this stage?
I think I've said before with Leicester City, the making of their season will be what happens when they're not in the Champions League. Champions League's obviously its winter break at the moment. That doesn't kick in again till the 22nd of February when they play Sevilla. Up until then, that's where I expect them to be picking up the results, where the players haven't got their eye on those fixtures coming up. They are losing Slimani, Mahrez, and I think another player as well to the Africa Cup of Nations. Jeffrey Schlupp is staying with them. But I think with the run of fixtures they've got coming up, they've got Chelsea, which I tip to be one of the games, if Chelsea didn't lose last night, that Leicester could do a job on them. We've then got Southampton, who aren't in a great run of form, and then they've got Burnley at home, which that's where Burnley will probably be a draw, something like a 0-0 again. Middlesbrough could shut them out. Burnley can probably do the same. And I think that's where we'll see Leicester start climbing back up the table and to a position that we'd expect.
Yeah, it's really, you would back them, wouldn't you, to play against Chelsea and be absolutely brilliant again. It's really, really bizarre how things work out with.
Do you reckon the African Cup of Nations could actually benefit some of those players, though? If Mahrez goes and has a really good tournament and then comes back for the later part of the season, do you reckon that could be a springboard for him?
Massively. Is it Musa, the other one that's going to go? Well, isn't he Nigerian? Because they didn't qualify, so I don't. Or is it Amati going?
Musa's not going. I think they lose 3 players off the top of my head.
I think Amati's Belgian. I think so. It might not be him.
You might well be right. I'll have to try and look up who the other players. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Mahrez looks to me. I don't know if you guys agree, but he looks to me like a player who had an opportunity to move in the summer, didn't for whatever reason, or didn't push hard enough, shall we say, and is now looking at the situation and going, maybe I should have moved. Maybe
I think there's 3 or 4 that look like that, frankly.
Yeah,
Vardy
agreed.
has been the same for most of the season as well.
Yeah, I agree. And like you say, if they go away to this tournament and have a good time, then maybe they will come back. Amati is actually Ghanaian, so maybe it is him that's going away.
That could be something to explain the form of Mahrez as well. This is probably Algeria's greatest chance to win that tournament, and perhaps he's just holding it a little bit back. We see it with European players on the run up to a World Cup or European tournament, just easing off a little bit just to make sure they don't get injured.
Yeah.
And it could be exactly the same that we see from Mahrez.
And particularly midfield, if they lose a few players, they've got a very small squad, Leicester. I didn't realise how small it was till I looked at it now. And yeah, particularly in that midfield
They do
area.
have Ndidi, though, don't they?
They have made that signing, haven't they? Who's very highly thought of, and he's come in, so that will bolster their ranks. But and they have Namphalis Mendy back fit again as well, and I'm a big fan of his, so I hope he shows what he's capable of in the coming weeks. But I want to move on from Leicester, Ross, because I'm going to give you the yellow peril that is Watford. Where do we begin? They are on one of those runs, aren't they? One of those really bad runs. They they've been poor for a number of weeks. It probably goes back to they beat Everton, and then since then they have got no win in 5. They lost to Man City and Sunderland. Then over the festive period, the 1-1 draw with Palace, they got absolutely tonked by Spurs 4-1. That could have been 14-1. It was that bad. And then they lost to Stoke in midweek by 2-0. Peter Crouch on the goal-scoring sheet again. I think it's his 98th career goal now. Well, what do you make of Watford? I mean, Matsari coming under fire, having to apologise for performances. Are they that sleeper team that is going to end up sliding down the table and end up in real trouble come the end of the season?
I was just about to say, I've been so kindly reminded by a lot of Southampton fans in the past 2 weeks that there's always one team that goes on a bad run and suddenly they slide down the table. And for my sake, I hope it's not us. I hope it is Watford. But for Watford fans, clearly they will be feeling the opposite direction. And yeah, they do run the risk of it. I think, again, it's much the same way with Quique Sanchez-Flores is that, and Claude Puel at Southampton, is that outsiders look at them in the position they're in the league and they say, actually, you know what, Watford are doing bad to be where they are, so why are you complaining? And then they go on these kinds of runs, and Watford fans go, that's why we're complaining, because this has been ready to happen for months now. And I think we're now seeing kind of like the build-up of all the anxiety they've had lately, in terms of some of their performances early season, when even you and I were saying, you know, what a brilliant performance and what a brilliant position in the league. Now I think Watford fans are kind of saying, this is what we were worried about. There was hallmarks of this for a little while now, and they do look like one of those sides that could get dragged down into it. I don't think they're in any real danger of going down, but certainly they could be that team this year that does get dragged into the mire.
Yeah, I do look at them and go, oh, it just doesn't show any signs of stopping. They've got a massive game. Well, it looks like a massive game now against Middlesbrough, who are not completely comfortable themselves. And then following that, the next 4 fixtures: Bournemouth away, Arsenal away, then they're home to Burnley. You think 3 points potentially there, and then they're away at Man United, so that they've not got it easy. I think we might see some business being done in January. Whether that be a manager going is open to debate. We shall have to see. But it kind of ties us up at the bottom. We should just briefly gloss over, no disrespect to these sides, but we've only got a set amount of time. So just touch on West Ham, are in 13th place now, 2 straight defeats. Lost, as we said previously, to Leicester, and they lost to Manchester United. Just very quickly on this game, either of you have anything to say about celebrity ref Mike Dean? He's becoming a bit of a parody of himself, isn't he? Are you a fan of his antics, either of you?
No.
No, I'd rather talk about the good refereeing performances, because I think he's tarring his fellow colleagues with a brush that they don't deserve to be tarred with. Michael Oliver has put in some absolutely fantastic performances in recent weeks, as has Martin Atkinson. I think the celebrity refs and poor refs we've currently got in the Premier League are, as I say, tarring the others with an unwanted brush.
Yeah. I'd also like to say that West Ham seem to be bidding on number of goals rather than quality of striker in this window.
Yes.
I cannot understand some of the bids they've been putting in. Scott Hogan at Brentford is a very good striker, but you know full well that they have only put in a bid for him because he's got so many goals in the Championship this year for a team that shouldn't be as high as they are in the league. And Jermaine Defoe everyone loves, but I don't see how Defoe fits in to the current West Ham system. They seem to have just taken this strange approach where they've just looked at a table and gone, right, they've scored a lot of goals, get him in.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of players in European leagues that are gettable with the sort of money and stadium West Ham have got. You'd think they'd be aiming a bit higher, although that didn't really work out in the summer, did it? But,
for the record, I don't think either Defoe or Hogan would be bad signings. I just don't see how they fit in. You know, they'd have to rework the way they play at the front line to make everything work for me.
Yeah, no, I know, I agree. I totally agree. I think you've just got to be a bit careful what you wish for as a West Ham fan with all these big name signings, and they don't come in. You've got to be careful what you wish for with regards to results they're getting. But nevertheless, I think they were unlucky against United because that sending off killed that game, and I think we can all agree it was never a sending off. If anything, I thought Phil Jones was more at fault in that incident than Faguli. But nevertheless, 2 defeats on the spin for Slaven Bilic's men. Burnley, they had a fairly decent Christmas period, a 1-0 win over Middlesbrough, that 4-1 demolition of Sunderland that we mentioned. And they went to Manchester City. And we'll talk about, we'll kind of rope this into top 4 conversation in a minute. We have to just mention the Guardiola meltdown. I particularly, excluding Man City as a club, let's just talk about Guardiola's mannerisms, ways, words, personality, whatever you want to call it. As a sort of budding journalist yourself, Ross, what was your take on that? Because I thought it was very rude and very arrogant from trying to answer a reporter who was simply doing his job.
It is, absolutely. Not to take credit for this, but the only mast I would pin my colours to when it came to Pep Guardiola when it was first announced he was coming in, it wasn't he's going to do very well. It wasn't he's going to absolutely flunk. The only thing I said for definite is that he would not like the English media, because the English media, love it when people fail, and they don't let you have an inch. Not to say that they wanted him to fail, because this I think is a misconception. The English media were all over him when it was first announced. I think they are perfectly happy either way. If Manchester City do brilliantly, they're fine. If Manchester City do terribly, they're fine as well. But they are incessant on their questioning, and they will always bug people, because football is so big, it's very tribal, in England especially. And I don't think Pep is entirely comfortable with the way things are done, especially in the media here. Pep, to me, looks like a man that is not enjoying watching English football. He looks to me like a man who's not enjoying the way his team's playing, or the way other teams play against them. And to then have to go and answer questions instead of on the passing and the football and the possession and whatnot, to then go and answer questions on, so do you think your team have a discipline issue? It's just not what he's interested in. It's so not. The difficulty for him is that this is how the press work. They ask you questions that you might not be entirely happy with, and people have been snappy with the press before, and that's all right. You kind of get over that, but to be as distant and almost talk with such disdain to a journalist and act as if that everyone's out to get him, I think I can't completely understand how he'd feel like that. But it's just the guy doing his job. There's no need to make it as difficult for him as he did there. It wasn't nice to watch. It was funny to watch, but it wasn't nice to watch. And it certainly isn't something I hope he does again.
No, here. And Josh, you wanted to add to that little bit on the cult of Pep? I'm sorry, I've got to stop doing that, haven't I?
Yeah, I've been listening to various other media outlets talk about Pep Guardiola.
Hang on. There's other media outlets other than us?
Yeah, I won't mention them on here.
I thought we were the only ones. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. But some quotes that came out of that on his philosophies of football and talks of out of context talks of him saying that his time was nearing, that he thought the end was coming. There are some changes to Pep's game, certainly over the years. He said things like he no longer watches 6 games of his opponents in preparation. He's also, as Ross says, wants to talk football. That's what he is. He's a football manager. He's not one that likes to get caught up in the mind games. I think it's the opposite to Mourinho. Mourinho is very much a man that likes to talk about the referee, likes to talk about anything but football, because of the style of play that he likes to implement isn't particularly aesthetically pleasing. But when you've got someone like Guardiola who wants to put on a show, who wants to show you off all his skills and how clever he is, and then not to be asked that and to be asked a question, and the way the question was asked as well, the order of the questions kind of led that to not helping Guardiola open up. So I don't want to say the journalist is at fault. I think Robbie Savage had mentioned it, that it's also about how you ask the questions. You start something on a positive note, say, good performance, you did really well with 10 men for a significant proportion of the game. Not, Fernandinho's been sent off for 3 games in a row, has he got a problem? Because that's not how you're going to get the desired result.
I agree with that, and nothing to do with my. Obviously, I'm very sort of open in my views of Pep Guardiola. I'm not the greatest fan. I respect everything that he's achieved and will no doubt go on to achieve at clubs, but I just don't buy into the hype. And I think what is quite interesting is that incident that was highlighted by that journalist. It strikes me that, again, to quote yourself, Josh, looking at other media outlets and listening to other podcasts, which apparently exist, it does seem to me a little bit like some of the other journalists are actually turning a little bit and maybe are actually going, you know what, maybe we did overhype a manager. Maybe we were a little bit caught up in the furore of finally getting this magical figure into English football. Maybe we have all gone a bit too far into the love-in stage, and now we need to pull back a little bit and give him a little bit more treatment.
I think the problem is that the journalists in this country especially can be quite tribal. Especially in the past few years after the scandal, the name of the Leveson inquiry. After that, I really should have thought of that quicker, considering I'm a journalist. But either way, after the Leveson inquiry, there is a whole lot of focus on journalism, and we kind of hunt in packs. We hate each other because we want each other's jobs, but if you diss one, you diss us all. And there is going to be a certain pushback against him. I think it wouldn't surprise me if there is a certain level of it, because, like I say, if you insult one, then everyone kind of gets up on you. It's like, well, we're just doing our job, you know. It does have a ripple, so I would be interested to see how it develops from here.
Yeah, agreed. I just thought it was a little bit classless, but go on.
Well, it didn't affect a certain manager on the other side of Manchester refusing to speak to the Big British Castle for 7 years.
That's very true.
Because of statements that were made outside of football, which ultimately did turn out to be true.
Yeah.
But I
think the other aspect of that, though, is that we've come to accept that from Mourinho. Same with Pearson. You know, we always kind of knew that was there, and
Pardew.
Ferguson.
I'm thinking the Man United manager from last year, Van Gaal. You kind of knew there was always that in him. Whereas I think in the 6 months that he's been here, I think the British press have kind of got this feeling about Pep, is that he brings a kind of a new level of class to conversation about football. And I think we've kind of started exploring that and kind of liking it. And now that results have been turning, and now that we're watching it, and now that we're saying, well, why are you playing wing-backs there? Why is Stones not there? Why aren't you fixing this, that and the other? Now that we're questioning things, I think there's been a certain level of certainly journalists starting to press issues that Pep is just not interested in. And it's kind of just soured the relationship all round. You know, none of it feels clean anymore. So I said, I think I may have said it to you, Kris, I don't know if I ever said it on a podcast, but I would not be surprised if we get to the end of Pep's second year, or maybe even his first year, and they've not won anything, and let's say they're third, for example, I would not be surprised if he walks away. Really, really wouldn't. If he's not doing very well, and all he gets every single time he goes backstage is Twitter lighting up about how he's been found out, and people ranting and raving about how he's not all that good, and then he goes out to his press conferences and it's all journalists saying, well, why has that gone wrong? How do you fix the problems at the back? Why is he a bad player? You know, I think he could get very easily fed up of all of this, and it really wouldn't surprise me to see him walk. Not that I think he will, because I think he will turn it around, but I would say after the second year, if he's still in this kind of position, would not surprise me whatsoever to see him walk.
No.
So I think on face value from the media, he was walked into a very easy job. When you look at the squad that's there and you think, yeah, this team is full of world-class players, he's actually got a harder job than I think everyone looked at. That team is aging. That team can't play the Pep Guardiola way. He builds a team. I've just written a blog about it, about how he builds teams, and he requires a very particular attribute from every single one of his players, and I don't think he's got that in every player that he thought he did, especially in the back line. There's only so many things you can sort out in one transfer window, and they looked at the attacking play and he sorted that. He's now got to go back and look at the defenders. They lost a couple of defenders across the transfer window anyway. Michaela's left, who was arguably one of their best defenders, but had to retire because he's 36, 37. Then you've got the Mangala and the Otamendi's, who weren't his defenders and couldn't do what he wanted. So he's brought in John Stones. He hasn't changed any of the fullbacks, which is a big part of Pep Guardiola's system, which I think can be explored in greater detail at another time.
Jordi Alba, Dani Alves, they're not those, are they?
No, and they're certainly not. They're not Philip Lahm or David Alaba, which is a completely
Rafinha
which is a different fullback system that he played at Bayern compared to Barcelona. They did different jobs, and he hasn't struck a system yet at the back. He hasn't been able to implement it because he hasn't got the players, which is why you've got someone like Kolarov filling in centre back. because I think he's going to look to bring in the Bayern style of fullbacks where they're almost inverted.
Yeah.
And Kolarov's going to be one, and Bakary Sagna will be the other. He just needs that left-sided centre-back to come in the window.
Sort it out, yeah, I agree.
The other side of it is that he has kind of suffered from past successes, because he walked into a Barcelona side that I know this isn't fair to say completely, but he did walk into a Barcelona side that had the players that could play the way he wanted to play. Then he walked into a Bayern Munich side that had players that could play kind of the way he wanted to play with a couple of tweaks. And everyone just kind of expected him to come in and do it at Manchester City, which I think is why there's just been so much criticism and why the journalists get on him so much, because they probably had the same idea. He's done magic at Barca, he's done magic at Bayern. He's going to come in and bang, it's going to change. He's going to fix it. And I think we all kind of agreed that he would do some good things for John Stones, and he sent him backwards because he's just telling him to just pass it rather than lump it, which is the main problem he had at Everton, and it's exposed the weakness again. I think there was an expectation that he would just wander in and it'd just be fixed. He just get it right, which I think is part of the reason why he gets so much stick now when it goes wrong. But the journalists, like I say, they will pick up on it. They are more than happy to see him wobble because it makes for good stories, and they will run with it. They'll run it into the ground because it's what they do with every manager. I completely agree with everything that Josh has just said. I really do. But I also think that there's a certain level of journalists, especially, that were completely okay with it going well, completely okay with it going poorly, had this image in their head of him wandering in, waving a magic wand and fixing it, and as soon as there's a little hint that it's gone wrong, bang, they're on it.
We love to build them up and we love to tear them down. That is what we do. And I do agree with Josh's point on that a lot of people seem to think they have a world-class squad. I look at that squad and I don't see many world-class players.
I think we agreed near the end of last season. We kind of went through the squad, didn't we? And we said how many of those will stay. I think between us we only thought of 5.
Yeah. And a lot, like Josh said, a lot of them are older. And I would argue that Chelsea, Arsenal, even Manchester United, Liverpool probably, man for man, Liverpool maybe is a bit more debatable because they maybe haven't got the depth. But I think certainly Spurs as well, Arsenal, Spurs, Man United and Chelsea would all have better squads on paper. And maybe with Guardiola, and this is nicely transitions into Chelsea, maybe the fact that Conte has come in and hasn't needed the time that Pep is claiming that he needs has maybe just filtered into that criticism, and it's where we'll move into next, because there was a big game last night, a day of recording on a Thursday. Chelsea's long unbeaten run of 14 consecutive games, 13 wasn't it, came to an end with a 2-0 defeat at White Hart Lane. 2 goals from Dele Alli, who's, fair to say, has had a pretty decent Christmas period himself. Back to goal scoring form, looks sort of fitter and sharper, and more importantly, he's decided to stay on his feet for more than 5 minutes. I couldn't resist. But Watford were destroyed by Spurs in the previous game, and that's 4 straight wins. And then they came into this Chelsea game, and they laid to rest the ghost of this Chelsea issue, particularly from last season. Ross, what did you make of Spurs' performance last night overall?
I thought the first half was terrible. Really did. It was one of the worst 45 minutes of football I've seen in a very long time. It just wasn't fun to watch. Thankfully, I was doing other stuff at the same time, so I was just kind of looking between them. But it wasn't fun to watch the first half. Very defensive, very stodgy 2 teams that completely matched each other. And it just wasn't all that engaging. The second half was a lot more frantic, a lot more fast-paced, the kind of style that I like. A lot more competition and a lot less tactic. And it was a great watch second half. I think they completely deserved it in the end. I don't think Chelsea ever really looked like causing them too much in the way of damage. I think there's an aspect of revenge from the game that cost them the league last season. I think maybe the record got to Chelsea as well. The pressure to go out there and beat a Tottenham side that was still a very good squad. And it all kind of came together. The first half looked very stodgy and dull and looked like 2 teams that were just trying to feed each other out and just make sure they didn't lose. And then as soon as the Dele Alli goal went in, it just completely changed the way the game was going. And second half, I thought Tottenham were well worthy winners. And by the way, credit to everyone on the pod last time out who called that, because I said that it would be Liverpool or Arsenal that would get them, but I think Josh and James both said it. I can't remember if you did as well, Chris. Forgive me if you did, but full credit to everyone that called him out on that.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember. I definitely looked at it and thought Spurs will be out for revenge. And
I think as Arsenal fans, to save us, we begrudgingly said a draw.
Maybe that's true. Yeah, I think. Yeah,
I think
we
we
did. I
said
think you're
draws.
right,
We
yeah.
said the winning run would come to an end, and we
That's
didn't
right.
want to give them enough credit to say that they'd win.
Bias aside, I
Although
think you're absolutely right.
sneakily, I did think they'd win.
Yes, I did as well. Yeah.
Again, to bring it back to fullbacks, Spurs doing exactly what you need to do against a 3-4-3, with the fullbacks occupying the wing backs, which meant that the two wide players from Spurs and the striker was getting straight at the juicy little middle of the centre backs and leaving the attacking midfielder free, who scored both goals with free headers. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm not-
exactly how you beat a 3-4-3. It's not unbeatable. It's not a clean sheet machine, so to speak.
And I thought Gary Cahill's interview post game was quite interesting in that he made reference to the record. He was asked about it, of course, but you know when sort of a player's trying to keep a straight face, but their face is just written all over it of, oh, we're gutted. Like, he really came across as a player who was properly gutted. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how Chelsea respond now with their next game, which I think is Leicester, isn't it? Next time Premier League game. Yes, Saturday, week after the FA Cup games away at Leicester. So that'll be interesting under the lights at the King Power Stadium. So worth keeping an eye on that one. So their great run, and it has to be said, it has been a great run. Credit where credit's due, does come to an end. Sticking at the top end of the table, seen as we can, we've looked at a couple of the challenges. Josh, what do you make of Liverpool? Because they are again quietly going about their business. Do you think that obviously they got the victory over Manchester City, which we didn't talk about because it was happened since the last podcast, which was a big result for them. Gini Wijnaldum with the winning goal there, but that game with Sunderland, just a minor blip, or is that a sign that maybe things are not all completely right at Liverpool? And of course, they'll lose Mane now, who's been sort of very key to their attacking movement going forward. I mean, would you say that they're maybe going to start to fade a little bit in this New Year period, or do you think that's just a minor blip?
I think I am worried for Liverpool without Mane. He's definitely taken them to the next level. I don't know who they've got within their squad because it's quite thin to then have someone else come in and replace him, especially if they have to do something like Firmino come in.
Sturridge, I would guess, would be go to the middle and move somebody wide, but yeah.
Potentially. That's the issue they've got, though, that Mane's gone and potentially Matip. I said before that he wasn't going because he'd retired from international duty, or at least that's what he'd told Liverpool, because he's just been named in the Cameroon squad. So we'll see what's happening with that one.
Yeah.
That's a curious case of what happens because he's one of their more solid defenders. So we'll have to see if they lose both of those. That kind of blunts one of their most promising attacking players and one of their best defensive players are gone for at least a month. So that could cause the cards to come down.
They do also have the FA Cup this weekend, and then next week they've got the League Cup with Southampton. So
they're going out of the FA Cup against the mighty Green Army this weekend, so that won't be an issue for them.
Well, hopefully they go full strength against Plymouth so they can rotate against us, but that's me being biased. But certainly the fixtures that they've got coming up, I think, will be big indicators of where they see their priorities this season. Because I think at this point after that Tottenham result, they'll probably think, we could do this. We've got a shot now. I don't think they'll be too fussed about the League Cup, although it's the semi-final. I don't think they'll be too fussed by it unless Southampton turn them over in the first leg. But the FA Cup, I can't really see them being fussed by that. I think they'll rotate for both of them and try and catch Chelsea when the games come back around. But the next two fixtures, I think, will be big indicators of where their priorities lie.
Yeah, agreed. And sticking with you, Ross, just for a minute, touch on Arsenal and Manchester United. Manchester United have been on a bit of a storm the past few weeks. Consecutive wins. We mentioned the West Ham win of recent games. They also got a very late victory over Middlesbrough at Old Trafford, which again they were behind for long periods until they came up with the 2 goals needed in the last 5 minutes to win that game. And we saw Arsenal get back to winning ways against Crystal Palace off the back of a win over West Brom Boxing Day. And then we had a bit of a nuts game at the Vitality Stadium on Tuesday, where they got a 3-3 draw. Was it Tuesday? Wait, it was Tuesday. 3-3 draw, having been 3-0 down. Glass half full or half empty for Arsenal, and are Man United back?
Yes, Man United are back. I think Mourinho's always been one of my favourite managers. I know he gets a lot of stick. My relationship with Jose Mourinho is a lot like my relationship with hot dogs. Everyone says, you know what's in that? Do you know what goes in a hot dog? And I say, I don't care, I love hot dogs. He's just such a good manager. I've always been a fan of him, and he's finally got Man United playing some decent stuff, and Zlatan and Mkhitaryan coming into form now. I think the bullying tactic he does with certain players, where he just kind of shuts them out and makes them go through this spell on the sidelines where they don't get any football, is a good test of character. You know, it doesn't always work, and certainly it's broken players like Joe Cole in the past. But for Mkhitaryan, it's done exactly what he would have wanted. So Man United, I'm a big fan of them at the moment. Great to see them turning things around. They've now got a sly chance of getting into the Champions League, though I still suspect there are 4 other teams that will get there before them. Arsenal, if you're an Arsenal fan, I imagine it's glass half empty after that draw, because that's a not an easy game. You know, Bournemouth, I always think are very tough games for Arsenal because you just play so similarly, and I think they just both sides open it up and they just both kind of play into their hands. So I never like Bournemouth Arsenal games for my Arsenal friends, because I think they're so dangerous for them. But to be 3-0 down and to then come back to 3-3 is a massive turnaround, and it's something that everyone should be proud of, realistically speaking. But unfortunately, because you're in a title race and you're in a race for the Champions League, it's a damaging 2 points dropped. Just before I leave this one, there has been a lot of talk about whether Giroud's goal or Mkhitaryan's goal was the best. I slammed Mkhitaryan's one on the last podcast because it was offside. Can I just say that because Giroud's was onside, that is the best goal I've ever seen, and it deserves all the praise it's getting.
Yeah, it is a wonderful technical goal, and yeah, we should certainly give it a nod on this podcast. It was, if ever there was a hipster goal, other than going in off someone's arse in midair, I don't think you could get more hipster than that. It was a truly superb piece of agility, composure. It's just brilliant. Really was brilliant, and rightfully got the praise it deserved for being onside as well, which is a bonus. And I don't know if any of you saw Zlatan Ibrahimovic's quote recently about the Premier League. Did you see this one floating around social media? Basically came out and said that I came to the Premier League and everyone thought it would not be possible. But like always, I make them eat their balls. Which I thought was rather nice of Zlatan, classic Zlatan that. But yes, they are motoring. However, Josh, a side that is not motoring, sorry Ross, are Southampton. 10th in the table, 3 straight defeats. I will give Ross an opportunity to get on his soapbox in a second, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think is going wrong at St Mary's. Humped by Spurs, losing at home to a West Brom side, albeit in good form themselves, in 8th in the table, and then kind of humiliated really late on, in particular by their old manager Ronald Koeman at Everton a couple of days ago. What do you think is not clicking at St Mary's at the moment?
So I'll allow Ross to come in and interrupt me if I start going off on something that's completely incorrect. But what I've seen from Southampton in the last few years, really, it's been since Pochettino's left, is the next manager that's come in has slowly taken the intensity out of that press that made them so good. It was that press from the front, and Puel has almost eradicated it, that the forward line now isn't putting in the same kind of shift that it has been in previous seasons. He's looking to try and implement a 4-3-3, and it's just not working at the moment. Is it perhaps his inexperience with the league? Potentially, but I think there might be something more to it behind the scenes with how he's dealing with the players, because there definitely seems to be something wrong there at Southampton. And I think the sounds coming out from the terrace, especially Ross, is they don't know if they want to continue with him anymore, because it doesn't seem to be finding the answers to the problems that they've currently got.
Your thoughts, Mr. Bramhill?
My thoughts are that our policy of selling people and changing people around has, at the moment, caught up with us. Not to say that it will by the end of the year, because I still always have faith in my club. Maybe it's blind optimism, but I always have faith in the structure at Southampton, and I think we'll still be okay by the end of the year. The problems are that I completely agree with Josh. The press that made us so dangerous under Pochettino has been slowly ebbed away over the past few seasons. Koeman did have us pressing, but not in the same intensity. Claude Puel has just taken it away completely because we're playing so many games this year, what with the Europa League as well. But it just makes us so limp when we've actually got the ball. It's all side to side, it's all backwards. I've sat in the stands a couple of times now this season, even against Inter Milan, where we ended up winning, which is one of the most famous nights in the history of our club. Even when we were in that game, we're struggling against a team that isn't in great form, and we're passing it backward. And everyone around me is going absolutely mad and moaning and complaining. Redmond is being kind of foisted on us at the moment because his form has dropped off completely, but he's still playing, he's still persisting with him. The changes in the side, there's 6 changes every single game. And a couple of weeks ago I was on board with it because we needed it for the Europa League. But now we've got 3 games in 117 hours, I think was the stat, and it was the worst fixture congestion that anyone in the Premier League had over the Boxing Day fixtures. But West Brom played the same side minus 1 change, which was Hal Robson-Kanu in for Rondon. Otherwise, they played the exact same team as they did the game beforehand when they came to St Mary's, and they looked fantastic. You know, they didn't look tired at all. They stayed strong, kept in formation, caught us on the break, and the Robson-Kanu goal is a fantastic goal, and it's cost us. But I just don't have any faith in us anymore. When we go a goal down, I just don't see where the next one comes from. And I know when we did the last podcast, we were talking about the Tottenham game, and Kris, you said that the game changed on the red card. For me, it changed on the goal. As soon as the goal went in, just Southampton dropped off entirely. And I just don't have any faith in us right now to get back into games. I don't see any danger. I don't see any thrust. I don't see any player that is completely comfortable with what they're doing. And I think the other big problem we've got is that Puel, for better or for worse, has not really connected with Southampton fans. And it is a dangerous game to be playing because it is mainly just how thick his accent is and how broken his English can be sometimes. You go and listen to a Claude Puel press conference, he repeats the same 4 lines every single week. No matter what question he's asked, it always comes back to the same 4 lines, and before I even read one of Puel's press conferences, I know exactly what's going to be said in it. There's nothing new, nothing changes, and I think fans are having a real tough time getting on board with him and putting faith in him when it's just so hard to connect to the bloke. He's a very nice guy, and I don't doubt that he's a very good tactician, but there's just this big disconnect at the moment between the fans and the way we've been playing the past couple of seasons and the way that Puel's got us playing, and I think there's just this feeling in general that we have not only stagnated, but started to regress, and there are a lot of Southampton fans on the back of these 3 results that are calling for his head. I'm not there yet, but I'm still in a position where I'm not sold on him, and if he got sacked tomorrow, I wouldn't cry over it.
You heard it here first. The worm has turned. I'm going to stick with Claude. I still think he'll get it right, but I do think he needs to.
He needs a new squad.
I was going to say,
if he wants to play his way.
Players. Yeah, talk at Rui Font once out tonight. Jose Font, sorry.
Yeah, he's having a transfer request. I was out today and I got back in, and the first thing my mum said to me was, "Hey, did you know that Jose Font's had a transfer request?" And I was like, "Oh, that's probably going to be some tabloid rumour that's been, Sky sources indicate, that kind of thing." And then I found out it was Les Reed, our director of football, has come out and said, "We've offered him a contract time and time again, but he's decided to turn it down." And now he's handed in a written transfer request. That is the club batting the ball back into his court, because about 2 months ago he was on Instagram saying the club didn't offer him a new deal and they weren't going to offer him a new one. That is the club saying, "Jose, we love you and you're going to go down as a legend when you leave this club, but we will not let fans think that we haven't tried." And it's already changed the way fans are reacting to Jose Font. My Twitter feed when I got back in is fans saying a lot about how Font is his head's already somewhere else and showing us a little bit of disrespect. "We don't need you, we're going to replace you," etc. It's very, very interesting to see how Southampton have changed the PR on the Jose Font issue. Yeah,
that is one that will run and run, and of course we will keep abreast of transfer gossip or official transfers throughout January, and I'm sure we'll make some time to do a hideous transfer special at the
I should also say on Southampton before we leave this, the month of January we have the FA Cup against Norwich, which I have a funny feeling we're going to get knocked out of, then the League Cup against Liverpool, and then we have 5 or so Premier League games, which are like Swansea, Burnley. There are a lot of teams down the bottom. If we end up at the end of January in the same kind of position, if not worse, then I think Puel's time may be up. But if we get a decent points return out of that, then he'll probably see out the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it, and a fair way. I think everybody has the right to criticise things going on at their own club, and I don't blame you for being a little bit cheesed off, shall we say?
You saw us against Hackwell Bitshaver. You weren't impressed either, were you?
No, I must confess that wasn't the best performance I've ever seen. We kind of have run out of time on the Premier League, but we will just give some honourable mentions to Everton, who are unbeaten in 3 games now, 2 wins from those 3 as well. West Brom, we mentioned, 2 wins on the spin. They're up to 8th. AFC Bournemouth, obviously that draw with Arsenal and a win prior to that away at Swansea, 3-0, looking impressive. Stoke back to winning ways with that victory over Watford. They're back up to 11th. And Burnley, despite that loss at Man City, 2 wins for them over the Christmas period, as we said before, with Sunderland against Middlesbrough, at least them in 12th in the table. So honourable mentions. We will just touch very briefly on the upcoming matches. FA Cup, of course, this weekend, but the Premier League gets back into gear on the 14th of January, where probably the standout fixtures, Swansea Arsenal, I think, is probably one that people will look at purely because both sides need the points. I think Watford Middlesbrough, more for Watford and what could happen to their manager more than anything else. West Ham Crystal Palace is quite a big one. I think London derby there. And of course on the Sunday, the little manner of Manchester United versus Liverpool. Saying that, Everton against Man City is not exactly a small fixture, and Leicester Chelsea on the Saturday evening is another big one as well. So we'll be across those as usual. Before we exit the Premier League talk, I do just want to share this wonderful piece of tweeting from someone who I'm sure won't be listening, but I'll give him the benefit of his Twitter handle, @Edo75, after Mike Phelan's sacking. He came out with this line: Hull sack Mike Phelan in the same week that they sack youth coach Peter Nlavu, or Nlove as it's pronounced. And he comes out with, you've lost Nlove and Phelan. Oh, I thought that was brilliant. I just thought that was very, very clever. So a good nod to you, sir, on a highlight of the week for the Twitter world. I picked that one out. So good work. Sorry for the singing, but it had to be done. Anyway, let's just quickly run through a couple of bits that's going on in the EFL. We're going to change it up slightly this week. We're going to give you a little bit of the Championship highlights, shall we say. Certain clubs that have been picked out, which Josh is going to look after. And Ross is just going to very quickly scatter through League One and League Two. There is good reason why we're going to skip through quite a lot of it tonight, which we'll come on to later. But I'll hand over to Josh. And Josh, what teams have you picked out from the festive period in the Championship?
Thank you very much. I have got 3 teams from the Championship, which I have designated the winners of the last 2 fixtures, and 3 losers as well. And we can go through those in a second. First, I want to start with Leeds United, who got a very decent draw against Aston Villa on the 29th. Very unlucky at the end to lose it to a penalty. You've then got Leeds winning 3-0 at Rotherham, and that's taking them up and potentially not making them a dark horse anymore for promotion, going a little bit higher there. You've then got Blackburn Rovers. They've got a win versus Villa and a draw versus Huddersfield. That's a brilliant result for them, taking them up to 22nd in the table. They've been an awful run since then. Anyone who watched the Newcastle game would say it was more of a smash and grab win. They were very, very good defensively, but Newcastle just couldn't string a pass together at all. Then got QPR, who were the only team to win both their games in the last 2 outside of the top 3 teams in the league. Brighton and Reading also won their last 2. Ian Holloway looks to have cemented his ideas and plans on that squad, and hopefully they can take this on to greater things. I don't know if, Ross, you've got anything on those 3 teams?
I would not be surprised to see Queen's Park Rangers get tonked again next week, frankly. They are blowing hot and cold, to say the very least. They were on a run of 5 defeats, and they got these 2 wins. I still think they're bang in trouble. And honestly, from the teams that are down there, if you look at Bristol City, Nottingham Forest, I still reckon Queen's Park Rangers are the wobbliest ones, because they've just lost Jaron Cherry, haven't they, to the Chinese Super League. So I still think they're in a bit of danger. Leeds, I'm a big fan of the way Leeds are going at the moment, with the fact they actually kept Gary Monk for more than about 5 days. He's done a very good job there, and now they've got new investment coming in. I can't think of the guy's name now, but he just bought a 50% ownership in Leeds United now. So I'm no longer of the opinion that Leeds could just sneak in. I think Leeds could ultimately end up 4th.
Cool.
I agree with
Thank
that,
you.
by the way, very quickly. They've really impressed me. And it's very, really good to see Kyle Bartley finally getting a decent run. And that Swedish lad at the back, for me, best defender in the Championship. Every time I see him, I know he's a little bit thuggish, and I know he's a bit unorthodox, but he's a proper defender. Is it Johansson?
That's Pontus Jansson, who's on loan from Torino.
Yes, I knew I'd seen him before, but I couldn't think where. Now it all makes sense, of course. But he's a proper defender. I do love a bit of Swedish. Anyway, carry on.
Oh, we've also got Charlie Taylor before we leave Leeds. Charlie Taylor is their fullback. He has long been touted as the next big fullback coming out of the Championship. I think his contract's up in the summer. Leeds have flat out said he's not going to be sold, but last summer, I think it was, he told Leeds he wouldn't be re-signing. So if you end up seeing, sometime in the summer window, Charlie Taylor get linked with your club and you're a Premier League fan, be excited. Don't just think, oh, he was a Championship player that got released, why we're being linked with him. He's a very good fullback, and I would be amazed if Leeds don't get something for him.
They said very similar things about Sam Byram as well.
They did,
before he left. Also on the ownership, I believe the guy who's just bought in 50% has an option to take the rest of Chilino's stake off him in the summer. So I think we'll move on to the losers. Birmingham City. I think there's a rant in here somewhere from Ross about how Birmingham have gone in the Zola Revolution. It's awful football with awful results at the moment. Although saying that, I think Derby County, who they drew with, are also one of my other losers of the 2 weeks. They have lost to Norwich, which seems to have saved Alex O'Neill for another week. I think that's how we're getting to Norwich games now, that if he wins, he's lucky, he's safe. Another loss for him, I think, could spell trouble. But whilst he's winning, I think he'll still be in a job, and you can say that for many managers out there. And then we've got Villa, a team that we thought, they were coming back, and they've just had an awful festive period. 1 point from 2 games, albeit they were beaten by a Cardiff team that didn't have a game on game week 24 because the Brighton game was cancelled with fog. They still had to do that travelling down to the south coast because they were already in the city when it was called off. To get a result against Villa, it's very good. And Villa are also losing Kodja to the Cup of Nations as well. He's gone. So that's one of their promising strikers leaving the club. I think that's all the losers for this week. The table is still looking very good for me as a Brighton fan. Brighton sitting top of the tree, with Newcastle coming up, playing a game more on 52 points. And then you've got the Reading, Huddersfield, Leeds, Sheffield Wednesday in the playoff positions. And at the bottom, you've got Burton, Blackburn, Wigan, and then Rotherham.
I think we all kind of agree that Rotherham are kind of dead weight in this league at the moment, don't we?
I was going to say doomed for me. Yeah.
I know they've had some decent results as of late. Now they've changed managers with Kay Jackett going, but I just don't see a lot of hope. They seem to be a club that don't really know which way they want to go.
Yeah, agreed. Is there any? I know obviously again we've got FA Cup coming up this weekend, but any sort of fixtures in the next batch that we are particularly looking out for, either of us?
I've got to look at the next fixtures now. Immediately the one that leaps out at me is Leeds Derby. That should be a very tasty game. Birmingham, Nottingham Forest, considering both sides are in pretty patchy form. If you're looking for a relegation battle, then Burton Wigan is another big one. And I don't think it will happen, but if Rotherham beat Norwich, I'm still stunned that Alex Neil is there, because I read the fallout every time Norwich lose. I go on Twitter and read some of the comments. Norwich fans are just fed up. They just want something to change, and I think if he loses to Rotherham, that surely has to be it.
Yeah, losing to a team like that in that situation, I think you're right, has to be.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield is a good one for the playoffs as well, whilst that's all mixing around. But that's, again, one of those fixtures that if that comes in later in the season, around May, you're getting quite excited about a game like that.
Yes, it's all shaping up, and stay tuned to the end of this podcast where we have a little announcement about something upcoming. But before we leave the EFL, Ross, you're just going to quickly whip us through the highlights or lowlights of League One and League Two.
Yeah, there's been so many fixtures in the lower leagues, all dotted over several days. It's difficult to know where I left off and where I haven't. So I'm really just going to update you on some of the big movers and shakers in the table and pick out a few stories if I can remember them, because the results are just all over the place. But starting in League Two, Doncaster Rovers are now top of League Two, only by a point ahead of Plymouth. I think as of time recording, they're currently playing Portsmouth. I don't know the score. Last time I checked, it was 1-1. But if they could get a win there, that would be a big blow to Portsmouth as well, because they were slowly starting to catch up on the top three, with Carlisle in third at the moment. But if Portsmouth can win it, then that gap shrinks even more. And Pompey have been desperately unlucky in the past few years with their promotion places, so I think they'll be desperate to try and climb into that top three if they can make it. Colchester United have been a bit of a crappy club, has to be said, the past couple of years. They seem to be constantly kicked in League One and then just never got relegated. But now they're finally down in League Two, they seem to be having a little bit more luck, especially lately. 5 without defeat now, up into 8th. They could manage to sneak into the playoff places come the end of the year. Exeter City, if you like Paul Tisdale and his amazing hat, you'll be delighted to know that Exeter City are now up to 11th on 33 points. That's such a huge leap from where they were when we were last talking about them. The relegation places do look a little bit more interesting, though, because I kind of have a soft spot for Notts County, not because I particularly have a soft spot for the club or the players. Mainly I remember them for that hideous spell they had with Sven-Goran Eriksson and Sol Campbell a few years back. But I've always kind of had a soft spot for them because they're one of the original clubs, and they are now down into 22nd after 5 straight defeats. They are in absolute freefall. They have just sacked their manager. It's John Sheridan, I think, was the manager at Notts County. He's been sacked, and he's currently been replaced by ex-Manchester United midfielder Alan Smith. I don't think he's going to be there for too long. I think they are looking for someone more permanent, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see how he does in his quote-unquote first job. Cheltenham and Newport down in the bottom 2. I would be surprised if it's anyone else other than Cheltenham and Newport that go down, but to see Notts County down there is a bit of a concern. Moving into League One, Sheffield United now top of the tree, 3 points clear of Bolton Wanderers, who have had a bit of a shaky run lately. They've lost to Chesterfield, and they had a bit of a stuttering draw against Coventry City on the weekend, who have been in no sort of form, and I think are in the relegation zone as of right now. So a big upset there for Bolton. They could have gone top if they'd got all the points from that. Scunthorpe now down to third. I still think Scunthorpe are one of the better sides in League One. But for me, I think the best side at the moment, just in terms of the results they're churning out, are Rochdale. They're now all the way up in 4th, and that is quite a turnaround. They've kind of been hovering in and around the playoff places, but they seem to have this odd form where at home they'll beat you 3-0, and then if you play them away, they'll get beaten 3-0. But they've slowly started to address that, and they're picking up more wins, grinding out a couple more points, and now they're way up to 4th. And if they can keep playing like that, I've always thought of them as like the West Brom of League One. Same with Keith Hill as the Tony Pulis of League One. I think Rochdale could be a huge shock in the playoffs if they get that far. So really, really interesting to see how Rochdale do as the season progresses. Looking down the rest of the table, Charlton have been picking up a few more wins under Carl Robinson. I think they've just picked up Jake Forster-Caskey as well, who was with him at MK Dons. I don't think he had a great spell at MK Dons, but certainly Carl Robinson has a bit of a soft spot for him, so he'll be hoping that he can come in and do a job for Charlton. Walsall slightly moving up the table as well. I've been following Walsall kind of because of, I think I said at the start of the season, they sold off their top 7 goal scorers, and they're still swinging. They're still 14th in the division. They still look in no real danger of going down. Milton Keynes Dons kind of hitting patchy form now under their new boss Robbie Nielsen, but slowly pulling themselves away. Tactics Tim still down in 19th, along with Bury, who last time we did the podcast were 13 without a win, or 13 losses in a row in the league. They have since picked up 2 draws, which is really nice to see. They haven't been able to win yet. I think it's 2 draws and a loss over the Christmas period, but 2 points nonetheless, which is more than they've managed to accrue in about the past 3 months. And then the bottom 3 at the moment are Coventry, Shrewsbury and Oldham. Shrewsbury have picked up some pretty big wins lately. I think they beat Bolton and Millwall, I want to say. And Oldham have just been in no form whatsoever. I was doing the chat with Manchester Key 103 a few weeks back, and they were saying to me that Bury are in free fall. You know, they seem to be the most likely to go down. For me, I'm more worried about Oldham, because Bury still have a very good squad, whereas Oldham just don't. They don't have a good squad. They don't have an overly good manager. The fans seem completely fed up, and I honestly couldn't tell you what kind of football they play. You know, it's not like Rochdale, who I can tell you will play not to concede, and Bolton, who play to play pretty football. I have no idea with Oldham. They just seem to turn up and kick it around. So I'm really concerned for Oldham. They have been in League One for a number of years. I remember them being there when Southampton were down there, and I've always just seen them as a staple. But they seem in absolutely no form, and seem favourites now to go down.
There you go, and that is the EFL roundup for another week. Plenty of things going on, sort of transfer wise. We should actually touch on, like Josh has said, Rudy Gustad has left Aston Villa to join Middlesbrough, isn't it? I think it's Middlesbrough.
Yeah, it's gone to Middlesbrough.
And to give you some breaking news, watching as again at the time of recording, Doncaster beating Portsmouth by 3-1, and the goalkeeper for Doncaster just got stretchered off with what looked like a leg break. Marco Morosi, his name is, went off the pitch with his leg in those old protective tubey things. So didn't look good for him. 6 minutes to go in that one. So looks like Donny are winning.
With Gusted, Koja, and Ayew, I forgot as well, has also gone to the Cup of Nations. That really does leave Villa fairly short up front at the moment. So I'd expect a new signing to come in, someone to push them up the league
Fulham
or consolidate positions.
Fulham want McCormack back on loan as well, so
I can see that happening.
I don't see why Villa would let him go now, considering the shortage.
Yeah.
But you know, if that does happen, then they have to have someone up their sleeve.
Yeah, true. It'd be interesting to see what movements we get. But Championship is usually busy this time of year, particularly since that loan rule has been binned. I know Henry Lansbury's attracting a lot of interest as well from Championship players. So, yeah, and quite a lot of Premier League clubs of players that are not getting games will look to play on their or get game time in the Championship with other teams. So we'll be keeping you across that as best we can. Right, okay. I think that will do us really for this sort of bumper edition. We thought we'd give you a bit of a midweek update because we said we'd do 2 podcasts during this festive period to keep everyone up to date with what's gone on. Appreciate you sticking with us because it's been a bit of a busy time for us all at the podcast, and of course I'm sure for all of our listeners as well during the festive period. It's always a bit nuts, so thank you for sticking with us. We've continued to get some really lovely YouTube comments and posts from people, so thank you very, very much for those. We got them from a chap called maybe I think it's a chap, could be a lady, I don't know. Luis, I would imagine it's a chap. Luis Zumaya, maybe. Just simply put the word brilliant after our Christmas special podcast. So thank you very much, Luis, for that, and thank you to everyone who's leaving comments or reviews on our various pages. If you don't already know, I'm sure you do, but you can subscribe to us via YouTube, via SoundCloud, via iTunes. And if you do listen to us on iTunes, or if you listen to us in general but use iTunes, drop us a review on there. That would be lovely. We're trying we're setting ourselves 2 goals for 2017. We're still trying to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube, and we're also trying to get into the iTunes charts, which is quite a lofty ambition, but hey, you've got to have ambition in this life, haven't you? So if you like what we do, let us know, your friends, or let your friends know what we do, and talk to people that you might know, or even if people you don't like, just tell them what we do, and hopefully they'll listen. So keep spreading the word, and feel free to send us any comments or quotes you wanted to get us involved with. Before we go, Josh, you've written a blog, as you teased earlier on in the show. Do you want to let our listeners know what it's called, what it's about? It will be posted on our website in the coming days.
Well, it's currently called Yet Untitled, because I haven't thought of a name for it yet, but it's exploring the 2 high-profile managers that came into the league and the differences and difficulties they've had in implementing their 2 philosophies. It's Conte and Pep Guardiola.
There you go. And we will post that on our website, footballhipsters.co.uk. That will go up in the coming days. So look out for that. I've just got to get it all looking pretty, and that will be released soon. If I can, I'll try and get it up by the end of the weekend. So it'll give people plenty of time to have a look at that. Okay, FA Cup this weekend. So we're going to give you a little bit of a treat this weekend. This is what we're planning to do. Obviously, plans can change, but as we speak, the plan is to do a shortened English breakfast show on Sunday as usual, which will go through the highlights or lowlights of this weekend's FA Cup programme. Obviously, there's a huge amount of matches. It'd be too long to go through them all tonight, but there's a lot of games, so we will look to go through those on Sunday night, and then the plan is to join you for an EFL special, which we're going to look to record early next week, and we'll release that in place of the still on vacation regular pod, because of course I think the Spanish league gets back underway this weekend, but we've still got another week or a week and a half, 10 days before the other leagues in Italy, France and Germany come back. So podcast main will return. It's just having a little holiday, and we'll give you an EFL special in the meantime. If you are a fan of a Championship club or a League One club or a League Two club, and you want your club in our EFL special, drop us an email, drop us a tweet, send us a pigeon if you wish with a message. But if you want your club to be featured or mentioned, or if you've got a question for us, drop us a line. We'll do our very best. Right, well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. My thanks to both Josh and to Ross. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Pleasure as ever.
Pleasure as ever.
And we will be back with you on Sunday to talk about the FA Cup. And as I say, keep your eyes peeled for that EFL special next week. We will speak to you very soon. Thank you for joining in.